The temple is still standing. The sacrifices are still smoking. The priests are still working their courses. And the writer of Hebrews tells a congregation of Jewish believers sometime around AD 63 that the whole system, given by God, observed by their ancestors for 1,400 years, is ready to vanish. Not because the system was bad, because it was finished. Jesus sat down because the work was done. The shadow served its purpose. The substance has arrived. The hard question is not whether God is finished with the old system. The hard question is whether we are. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Seek, Go, Create. I'm Tim Winders. And all that we're doing here is a spinoff from something that I did not too long ago where I read the entire New Testament. I compressed it in 90 days, and I attempted as best I could to read it in context and in the order it was written. A lot of people talk about context. I do not hear many people talking about the order that it was in, not the order that's in our Bibles. And I've got mine here because I'm going to read something shortly, but that order is awesome. It's good, but it's not the actual order that it was written in and when it was available to audiences in the first century. I wanted to read it in that order, and that's what I did. In fact, I looked for reading plans, couldn't find them, so I did some research, spent about a year or so researching this, and I put the books, the letters, in the order that many scholars believe that they were written in, and I ended up reading it in that order. So I created a reading plan, and it surprised me. It was unique to me. There's all these topics that spun off from it, and that's what I'm sharing in these episodes that kind of follow up the reading plan that I did. So anyway, it was incredible. I challenge you, just like it challenged me, but I challenge you to kind of do the same thing. And you can go get the plan. It's free. Just go get it, download it at k2m.foundation/NT90, k2m.foundation/NT90. Download it, start it. I would say read at your own pace. I've noticed some people are stretching it out quite a bit. That is fine. We're not going to get legalistic about it, but I will say this. The more you compress it into a shorter time frame, I think the more impact it will have. I know it did that for me because it just kept things tight and forced me to connect a lot of dots. Sometimes when you stretch it out, it's harder to do that, but do whatever works for you. Go get that plan. The links should be down in the notes wherever you are listening or watching this episode. All right. This is what we're calling New Wine. That's the title of this episode. It's the first half of a two-part arc, but it's really kind of a continuation of some things we've been discussing. Last week, we put two letters side by side. We did Romans, which was really being put into the Rome face of the pressure, the empire of Rome. Hebrews was into the face of the temple structure, the temple system. Same gospel, two bookends. If you haven't listened to that episode, this is a standalone, but you may want to circle back at some point because they do fit together. This week, we step inside the Hebrews half. Hebrews makes one argument across 13 chapters, and it is this. The old covenant religious system was real. It was given by God. It was good, and it was always temporary. It was a shadow pointing forward to a substance, and the substance came in the first century. And when the substance came, the shadow did its job and stepped aside. Old Wineskins, next week, the title of next week's episode, it walks through what the church, many of us, kept rebuilding anyway over the last few thousand years. And so we're going to have kind of a two-parter here that go hand in hand. Okay. Before we walk through Hebrews, we have to start with the words of Jesus. And I actually want to take some time and read this because it's very important. I think many of us take the things that Jesus said and they kind of make them stand alone. And then we take some things from some of the other letters and books of the New Testament and they stand alone. We say we're reading them in context, but we never connect the dots. Well, we're going to connect a few dots here. So I'm going to read from Mark chapter 2, and I'm going to start in verse 18. The disciples of John and the Pharisees were fasting. Then they came and said to him, "Why do the disciples of John and of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?" And Jesus said to them, this is in verse 19, and I'm about to get into the red letters here. Read this on your own at some point. "Can the friends of the bridegroom fast while the bridegroom is with them? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. But the days will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast in those days." And then here's verse 21. "No one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, or else the new piece pulls away from the old, and the tear is made worse." And then verse 22. "And no one puts new wine into old wineskins, or else the new wine bursts the wineskins. The wine is spilled, and the wineskins are ruined. But new wine must be put into new wineskins." All right, that is somewhat foundational to this episode and the next episode. You see where it got the name. New wine and old wineskins is the next episode. So, Jesus answers, he's asked, "Why do you not fast?" He answers with a wedding metaphor and then two short parables and says, you can't take old cloth, you can't take new cloth and patch an old garment, and then you can't take new wine and put it in old wineskins. It just doesn't work. And so those are two metaphors. One point, the new thing he is bringing, that he is all about, cannot be added to the old container. You cannot patch the gospel onto the old covenant. You cannot pour the new covenant into the old wineskins. You try and you lose both. They get destroyed. It does not work. Then Luke actually records one more line that most people skip. Luke 5:39, "And no one after drinking old wine desires new, for he says the old is good." And because that's really what Hebrews is all about. You can't go back to the old wine once you've tasted that new wine. That is the warning for Hebrews. People will prefer the old anyway. They'll try to gravitate towards it. It's comfortable. It's familiar. It's tested. It's religious. It feels right. But Jesus said the new is what God is doing. The container has to change. Hebrews will spend 13 chapters making this argument theologically. Jesus said it in 3 sentences. New wine, new wineskins. The old container cannot hold the new thing. Now, I got to share this. This came up recently. I sent this out in an email for those folks that are on our email list. And if you're not on our email list and you want to get these type updates just on things that are going on, when you go download the reading plan, you'll get these updates on things. But I commented, Glory and I, we have just moved into a new home. We've actually built a new home in the desert of Arizona, sort of the high desert in southern Arizona. It's a place where we've been planning for and building over the last year. This is a new build, a new home. It's a different season of life for us. We've been nomads since 2012. And I got to tell you, one thing that we did was we had a few things that were stored away in Georgia when we began traveling back in 2012. We stored some great furniture. It was really good. We felt like we were going to be a good steward of it and just store it away, that if we ever needed it again or someone maybe needed it, we would have it. So we put it in a U-Haul and we drove almost 1,800 miles from Georgia across Texas, 802 miles across Texas, by the way, in June, in the heat, in the hot. And we moved that furniture and a few other items that we had kept in storage for 14 years. We were sure that we could use and that we needed every piece. We pulled into the desert, tired, proud of ourselves for making it. We did it in 2 days. I don't really recommend that, but we did it in 2 days, drove way too much for a couple of 60-something people. Then our son Joshua came down and helped us out. He was up in central Arizona, came down. He helped me move it in, started carrying it into the house, and the rooms were different. The lighting was different. You know what? It's a different season of life for us. The old pieces, they did not quite fit. I mean, they fit. They just weren't quite right. Not bad furniture, nothing wrong with it necessarily, but just furniture shaped for another house. You know, we were taking this new house and trying to patch together some old cloth, or taking some new wine and pouring into the old wineskin. Some of it had to go. And so even though we're trying hard to make it work, and we often will do that, it just doesn't seem to fit. We're trying some rugs and some things to see if it will work, but I just got off a call with Glory a little while ago. I'm in Georgia right now, and she's there, and she's just saying, you know, I just don't think it's going to work. That's a small version of what Hebrews argues about an entire religious system. The old wineskin was real. It was good, served its purpose, but the season changed. The substance came. The old container cannot hold the new thing. Jesus said it first, and then Hebrews systematized it. All right, now let's talk about first the old system. We need to make sure we understand it. And I think in our modern world, those of us that were not part of the old covenant temple system, we can't really grasp it. We can read about it in the Old Testament and we could attempt to understand it. And I know a lot of people really, really study it. I've studied it some, but not in depth. But the old system was really not a vague religion. It was an operating system. It was very specific to what was going on with God's people at that time. There was Mount Sinai, there was the tabernacle, Levitical priesthood, annual sacrifices, the Day of Atonement, the festival calendar, Sabbath, dietary laws, ritual washings, circumcision, the whole architecture built around one premise: God is holy, people are not. Access to God requires a mediator and a sacrifice in an attempt to get people holy enough to get into the presence of God. That is what was going on with the Old Covenant and the law. The premise was true. The system was the answer to the premise. The system ran for about 1,400 years, from Sinai to AD 70 in the first century. It produced prophets, kings, psalms, a literature of worship and lament the world has never matched. It was God-given, okay? I'm not here arguing against that. It was God-given. It pointed forward. It worked the way it was designed to work. And then Jesus showed up, lived a perfect life, died on a Roman cross, rose 3 days later, ascended to the right hand of God. And the writer of Hebrews looks at the Jewish believers in the 60s AD and says one thing: the wineskin you came out of was never the destination. It was the road sign pointing to the destination. You have arrived. That is the argument of Hebrews. The old wineskin was real. It was given. It was good. It was always temporary, and it has reached its expiration date. Not now, in the year 2026. It reached its expiration date in or around 63 AD or 33 AD or definitely 70 AD when the temple was destroyed and that system was judged and put aside. So it has reached its ending and its expiration date. Now, there are two key words I want us to look at here that keeps coming up in Hebrews: shadow and substance. And for a long time, I didn't really clearly understand what was meant by these words. Let's look at them for just a second. Hebrews 8:5 says, the priests serve a copy and shadow of the heavenly things. Hebrews 10:1 says, the law has but a shadow of the good things to come instead of the true form of these realities. A shadow is a real thing. It is cast by the substance. It is shaped like the substance. It tells you the substance exists, but the shadow is not the substance. You cannot live inside a shadow. You cannot eat a shadow. You cannot be saved by a shadow. The shadow is the announcement or the representation that the substance is there or on the way. It is coming or it is there. Shadow and substance is the vocabulary that Hebrews uses. New wine in old wineskin is the Jesus vocabulary. Same argument. The container the new thing comes in is not the old container. The whole old covenant system was a shadow. Walk through this very slowly. Let's take a look at this, okay? Follow along. The tabernacle and temple were a shadow of God dwelling with people. The substance is God dwelling in believers by his Spirit. The Levitical priesthood was a shadow of access to God. The substance is Jesus, our great high priest, opening direct access for all. The animal sacrifices were a shadow of a real sacrifice. The lamb, the substance is Jesus offered once and for all. The Day of Atonement was a shadow of one final atonement. The substance is the cross. The festivals were a shadow of the gospel calendar. Passover points to the crucifixion. First fruits points to the resurrection. Pentecost points to the Spirit poured out. Tabernacles points to God dwelling with people permanently. The Sabbath was a shadow of resting in finished work. The substance is Hebrews 4:9. A new rest has come. The covenant itself was a shadow of a deeper covenant. The substance is Jeremiah 31. The new covenant written on hearts. That is what every better than passage in Hebrews is doing. Jesus is not a replacement for the old system. Jesus is what the old system was pointing to the whole time. The shadow did not lose. The shadow finally got its substance. Now, the argument of Hebrews really builds and crescendos on one image, kind of like where the shadow and the substance come together. Like the light is so bright, the shadow disappears, is also another way of looking at it. In fact, I just thought of that. That just came to mind. So that's pretty good. There's so much light that has now come that there is no more of a shadow, that is, the substance and shadow have become one. Every priest under the old system stood. Every priest, every day, year after year, for 1,400 years, standing, offering, standing, offering, standing, offering, because the work was never done. There was never a time where the priest said, we are finished. It was constant, over and over and over. Hebrews 10:11, though, says every priest stands daily at his service, offering repeatedly the same sacrifices, which can never take away sins. In other words, it attempted, but it never was able to take away sins. Then, verse 12, but when Christ had offered for all time a single sacrifice for sin, he sat down at the right hand of God. He sat down at the right hand of God. That is the entire argument of the book of Hebrews. The priest always stood up. Jesus sat down. He rested because it was finished. Now, let's go through some of these better than items so that we could really see. We talked about this in the last episode, but I want us to put it in the context of what we have just said. Each one of these is the writer of Hebrews naming a piece of the old system and saying it has been completed. The shadow has become the substance. Better than angels. Hebrews 1, Jesus is the radiance of God's glory, seated. Better than Moses. Hebrews 3, Moses was faithful as a servant in God's house. Jesus is a son over God's house. Better than Aaron. Hebrews 4 through 5. Aaron and his sons died. Jesus lives forever to make intercession. A priest in the order of Melchizedek. Hebrews 7. A priesthood that predates the entire Levitical system. Melchizedek was with Abraham, the first occurrence that we're aware of, well before the Levitical system was put in place. A priesthood that does not depend on lineage, does not end at death, and does not need a temple or a building. It's a better covenant. Hebrews 8, quoting Jeremiah 31, I will put my laws into their minds and write them on their hearts. It's a better sacrifice. Hebrews 9 through 10, the blood of bulls and goats covered. The blood of Christ removes once for all forever. Better access. Hebrews 10, 19 through 20. A new and living way through the curtain, that is, through his flesh. The curtain that kept everyone out of the Holy of Holies tore top to bottom the moment he died. Access was now available to all. Then Hebrews 10:18 closes the whole stack of betters in one sentence. Where there is forgiveness of these, there is no longer any offering for sin. I think we could also say there is no longer any need for offering for sin because the ultimate offering has been made. No longer any offering. That's the line that ends the system. The substance has come. The shadow has become the substance. The shadow has done its job and it is gone. Jesus sat down because the work was finished. The hardest warnings that we see in the New Testament really do live within this letter of Hebrews. Hebrews 6, 4 through 6, Hebrews 10, 26 through 31, Hebrews 12, 25. Most modern Christians read them wrong because they read them, as we've been saying in this whole study we've been doing, they read them out of context. The warnings in Hebrews are not aimed at a modern day Christian who has a moment of weak faith, or they're thinking about backsliding, or they're considering it, or they have backslidden. I don't know if any of y'all grew up in churches where that word backslide was part of the vocabulary, but if not, I apologize. But that's something that I heard quite a bit in the Southern Bible Belt culture. The warnings were actually aimed at a Jewish believer who is thinking about walking out of the new covenant, the new wine, and back into the temple, tasting of the old wine. That is the scenario that Hebrews, that's the context of Hebrews. That's the scenario. Persecution is rising. Christianity is actually illegal. Judaism is legal. The temple is still working. They can see it. The synagogue is still safe. And the writer of Hebrews in about 63, the year 63 of the first century, they're saying, do not retreat. Don't go back. If you walk back, you're walking away from the substance back into the shadow that is about to disappear. There is no sacrifice for sin in that direction anymore. The cross is the only sacrifice. The only direction forward is forward. Don't go back. That's the message of Hebrews. Don't go back. Hebrews 12:4 puts the moment plainly. You have not yet resisted to the point of shedding blood. Not yet. Those are my words, not yet. The worst is still ahead. Stay in the substance. Do not retreat into the shadow. These warnings are real. They are sharp, and they are aimed at a very specific decision in a very specific moment in history. They are not a general doctrine of how Christians lose their salvation. They are a final plea to a community standing in the doorway between two systems, telling them which way to step. Don't go back. Read them in their original setting, and the warnings are even more urgent than the modern misread makes them, because the writer is not warning about a moment of doubt. The writer is warning about an institutional retreat that within 7 years, we know this historically, the Romans were going to make impossible anyway. Now, this is kind of how it played out. Hebrews was written around 63 AD, about the year 63 in the first century. The writer keeps using urgent language. In these last days, the day is drawing near. It's ready to vanish away. Imminent, the time is now. Language, not 2,000 years later language, now in 63 AD. That language, when we read it out of context, sounds metaphorical. We try to apply it to us, and it just doesn't fit. The reason why? It was not metaphorical. It was real. It was for those people at that time. 7 years after Hebrews was written, the Roman general Titus laid siege to Jerusalem. And by the year 70 AD, the temple was rubble. The priesthood ended. The daily sacrifices stopped. And they have never resumed. To this day, almost 2,000 years later, there is no temple. Many people talk about it. They say that there needs to be a rebuilt temple so certain things can happen. There's no need for that. That is going back to a shadow when we have the substance. There is no temple, and it would be my estimation that we will see no temple in Jerusalem. There is no functioning Levitical priesthood. There are no animal sacrifices for sin. The system the writer of Hebrews was warning these believers about did not slowly drift into obsolescence. It was demolished by an empire and never rebuilt. And Hebrews, let's connect a few dots here. Hebrews was not the only voice. Jesus, about, 30-something years later, Jesus said it would happen. In his final week, standing in the temple courts, he told his disciples not one stone would be left on another, and that the generation hearing him would live to see it. That's Matthew 24. John saw it too. The book of Revelation shows the judgment falling on the old system. The temple is measured, the great cities in flames, the old order is ending, and a new covenant city descending in its place. The substance had come. The shadow did its work, and then the shadow was removed, or, as I said earlier, it sort of dissipated or disappeared into the light of the substance. The Jewish believer reading Hebrews in the year 63 AD could not yet see what was coming 7 years. Even though they'd been warned about it, there's been prophecies, and most New Testament writers had been talking about the day of the Lord or the end of the age or the last days. They were speaking about it, but they couldn't see that coming. They didn't know for sure. The writer could, or at least the Spirit who inspired the writer could. The whole letter is shaped by the awareness that the clock is running out on the old system, not because God hates Judaism, because the road sign does not need to keep standing once you have arrived at the destination. For a believer standing in the doorway, this is the wait. Going back was not just nostalgia. Going back was running toward a building that was about to fall, about to be destroyed. The writer is pleading, do not retreat. The substance is here. The shadow is dissipating. It's leaving. Stay with what is real. And this part matters. The book of Hebrews never says the church will tear the temple down. The temple comes down because the empire decides to crush a Jewish revolt, and Jerusalem gets caught in the middle. The shadow was already theologically finished. That was at the cross. Rome just removed the building within the generation that Jesus spoke about. It was 40 years almost to the year. That's what occurred. Now, what does it mean then? And then we'll look at what it means for us. A first century Jewish believer reading the letter of Hebrews heard a direct warning. The system you came out of was real and good. It pointed forward. The forward has arrived. Do not go back. The clock is running out. Now, here's where our modern misread sort of takes the text in a different direction, a direction that, in my opinion, it was not intended to go. Some read it as anti-Jewish, as if the letter is saying Judaism was a mistake. It is not saying that. That is not the essence of Hebrews. The letter calls the system God-given. That is not anti-Judaism. The letter is grieving the necessity of the transition. It's going to hurt. It's going to be painful. This is not going to be good, what's about to happen a few years from the time this letter is written. They're not celebrating the demolition. Other modern readers often ignore the original audience entirely and use the warning passages to scare individual Christians about losing their salvation in a modern moment of doubt. This is not what the warnings were about. And in fact, I think that is kind of spiritual or theological abuse when you do that, because it keeps many people, depending on their personality styles, afraid they're going to do something wrong and lose their salvation. Stop doing that. That's not what Hebrews is about. The warnings were about institutional retreat into a system that was about to collapse. Both of those misreads come from ignoring who the letter was actually written to, taking it out of context. Now, let's look at what it does still mean for us. It still preaches. There's a few things that we can carry forward from Hebrews when we take it in context first. First thing is, The access is open wide. The curtain is torn. There is no human mediator between you, me, or God. We can go listen to preachers, teachers, pastors. We can go to priests. We can do that, but we do not need them between us and our God. You don't need a priest to confess to. You don't need a building to enter to be near God. I'm not saying you don't have to go. I'm just saying you don't need it. You do not need a religious professional to bless your worship. The new covenant runs on direct access through Jesus as the high priest. Hebrews 4:16, let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace. That is for you. That is for me right now, today. And it always has been for the last 2,000 years. Second, the work is finished. Jesus sat down. You're not adding to it. We don't have to put layers on top of. We don't have to lay a cloth over the legs of the people laying in front of the church service, even if they're wearing pants and not a skirt. You don't have to do that. You're not earning it. You are not maintaining it. Resting in the finished work is the substance. The Sabbath was always pointing to. That is what Hebrews says we left behind. The system was a shadow. The substance came. Jesus sat down at the right hand of the Father. New wine, new wineskins. Jesus said it first. Hebrews said it in detail. The substance has come. The old container served its purpose and stepped aside. The shadow, because of the light, merged into the substance. We are now functioning and operating with the substance alone. We don't need the shadow. The temple is gone. The priesthood is gone. The sacrifices are gone. The covenant is fulfilled. Jesus sat down because the work was finished. That is the half that Hebrews celebrates. The half we have not talked about yet is the half that is going to make next week a little bit harder, because unfortunately, the church, and we'll use that term in big terms, it did not actually leave the old system behind. The church kept rebuilding it piece by piece, different vocabulary, same architecture. Sabbath became Sunday, buildings became temples, pastors became priests, tithing became obligation, festivals became liturgical seasons, sacred space, sacred clothing, sacred objects, sacred professionals. The whole shadow got reassembled on top of the substance. Nobody planned it. The muscle memory, human nature just took over. That's what we're going to look at next week. Old wineskins, what the church brought back anyway. We'll name the dominoes and we'll see how they fell, or they are still falling. And then a few weeks after that, we're going to look at the political face of the same rebuild. This is something that keeps nagging at me, and I want to try to cover it, but I wanted to kind of build up to it, because the church did not just rebuild the temple. The church has also attempted to rebuild Rome. And that's what we see today in our modern governments and political structures. Make sure you get the reading plan. k2m.foundation/NT90. Download it, read through it. I challenge you. I beg you, please go do it. Don't listen to me on all this. All this stuff is just spinning off from this reading that I've done. If you go through that and something that you read doesn't match up with what I say, that's fine. I'm okay. But if it doesn't match what you have been taught, I think you should trust the text. This is Tim Winders. Keep seeking. See you on the next episode.